If you don't know Word Up, we're a community bookshop and art space run by local residents, many of whom are volunteers. We started as a 1-month-long pop-up shop in 2011, then stuck around due to overwhelming community demand. This summer, we celebrated our 10th anniversary, so that was very exciting. We can be found at 2113 Amsterdam Avenue at the corner of 165th Street and Washington Heights, New York. We host events for all ages and sell used and new books in English and Spanish. So check us out at wordupbooks.com to share and see other virtual and outdoor events that we have. We're currently open Tuesdays through Fridays, 12 to 6 p.m. and Saturdays, 11 to 5 p.m. And today we're here to celebrate Motherland by Ananda Lima, which is the winner of the 2020 Hudson Prize and recently shortlisted for the 2021 Chicago Review of Books Award for Poetry. So congratulations. And here with Ananda is Marina Carreira, Lee Luan, Xandria Phillips, and Felicia Zamora, who will be starting off our poetry reading.
Thank you, Carolina. I really appreciate it. I am so excited to celebrate Ananda and Motherland. Ooh, congratulations. I know this is one of many, many different readings and events that you have, Ananda, but congratulations so much. It is, I cannot wait to continue to celebrate this book now and throughout the years to come. You know, you never know how a book has an impact. And I feel like this one really, I mean, right out of the get-go, it's getting so much exposure and I can't wait to see where it goes and how that influences you as an artist to come. So thank you for letting me join you tonight. I'm also so excited to be here with Xandria and Marina and also Emily. Wonderful to be reading with all of you as artists. But just so I don't take up too much time, I'm going to jump into reading sections of a slightly longer piece to kind of get us started. This is a longer piece that I've been working on, but it is part of my newest manuscript, which really begins to talk about the intersections of trauma and memory, but also pulling back on a larger ideation of how is time working for individuals of color who we have often the ability to rewound ourselves in the creation of our own art at times. So this piece, I'm going to be reading sections of Meditations on Ghosts. And when the name Gloria is mentioned, it's in conversation with Gloria Anzaldúa, as well as it's probably important to know that I grew up in a motel, which is sort of an interesting fact about me as an artist, but it really kind of shapes some of my existence. So Meditations on Ghosts. I believed once in Ouija boards. I was standing in front of my own reflection, mouthing bloody, 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 and how still I hesitate because I know words transfigure tongues as easily as brain, transfigured as spells cast without my consent. In anticipation of monsters who don't resemble my cheekbones, my clavicle, my left earlobe slightly tipping forward, who don't live in motel rooms. Someone says Bates and I wish myself Hitchcock, not Perkins. In number 3, a counting of 3 brown kids drawn inside a blueprint of a 1950s motel drawn with charcoal so the pencil may turn at any moment to eraser. I believed once in a spirit here, then broken. I name this in my lungs with breath and heaves in singed burn, rhyming my name already in astral plane. Gloria, I'm scared too. A mouth open, a mouth closed. This page, a mouth chewing corners raw, grinding down molars to indistinguishable rubble. And with jaws I sift, build voice from chalky dust. Ohio fog brings the scent of acorn and wet soil. Behind the Alden Motel, I lift the same acorn, 623 miles away, 32 years in the past. We pretend to know time. Nothing more elusive than imprint of compounding seconds, minutes, hours, metabolizing in flesh. I grow age in bones as thistle, the weed wanting garden. Finch's carcass flattens grass, left wing severed down to nub, right wing expands coverts and tertials in full spread before acknowledgement of another type of flight. Gloria, I itch at borders, the deep scrape before pus erupts and fountain from the body and my own flesh under my nails, thinking this too another type of relocation. The migration inside me itches to bone. Stayed too long, the voice and marrow wonders, too long where, my ventricles ask, in search of burrow of the dirt where my cells root, and I taste language withheld from my tongue. How the discomfort of contradictions aches, how body, possession of me. I commune with my own nakedness. I am a mouth speaking, unsettling things. Grandpa Bernard ate liver and pickled pig's feet. Grandpa Bernard's square face resembled the old man from Up. I cry intermittently throughout that movie, every time. Grandpa Bernard raised fists. Grandpa Bernard called me faker just before my appendix burst. Grandpa Bernard said, "Don't throw away that box, that's a good box." Remnants of the 30s, shadows of enough. Variations of depression. Grandpa Bernard held my wrists until they bruised. Grandpa Bernard spit words, spick and dirty and beaner at my brown face over and over. I read traumatology is a branch of medicine, vocabulary of wounds. He trained me in the etymology and phonology of ache. What exists in the gaps? Wanting. In his last years, Grandpa Bernard barely washed. His atrophied leg, a slender twig from once girthy log, and lower jaw partially removed, an orange-sized tumor. Reminders of an earlier version of the person in his bones. Half-grown stubble weeds from his chin and a lingering odor of skin, withheld too long from water and soap and musty sting of ripe pubic hair. Yesterday on my walk, I inhaled the same stench, aroma wafting from my flesh, hair follicles, sweat glands. What else does my body harbor in the lineage of sour? Gloria, I want to empty, yet the damn game where I stand in front of the mirror. I want saliva of naming to wet my howl on something other than grief. I dig, and in the unearthing, I find. Gloria, I too grope for words, my dust devil heart. All this time I chase my own ribs, each stair of bone a climb. I chase my own innards. I am not alone. Gloria, my expectations continued to condition me. When he told me you'll amount to nothing, your words, only just written unread by my 5-year-old eyes, found their way into my bloodstream. Chicana, daughter of doubt, I label myself now. I am a dangerous beast. I bring discomfort in shaking the white gaze brown, in my skin, in my mind, thinking, in my desires manifesting. I spread my claws wide in the mirror, lick fangs, rawr, rawr, rawr. Thank you.
Yes, and I think it's Marina now. Thank you so much, Felicia. That was amazing. As usual, beautiful.
That was amazing, Felicia. Sorry, I'm like still in awe, right? Those roars are still sticking with me. Thank you, Ananda, so much for letting me be part of this amazing celebration. I think I've been waiting for Motherland for years now, ever since I probably became a mother, and I too sort of tried to investigate what that means, right? What belonging to something means, what something belonging to you means. And I think you've given me a new language for understanding Americanness and motherhood. So I'm grateful to you. And I think this world is grateful to you for your work. So I'm proud to write alongside you and to celebrate Motherland with you. I'm going to read 3 poems from a manuscript that I'm working on that deals with motherhood, Americanness, and loss through the pandemic. So yeah, I'm just going to jump right in. This one's called Penumbra. A squirrel paws through patches in my front yard, looking for as much sustenance as his tiny arms can gather before the frost. There are no signs of winter yet, but my muscles are twine. My blood's a fluvial rush to the top of my brain while my skin is still on summer, basking under the glory of our taken for granted star. It's okay to not be okay with this new normal. Remote learning, unlearning, nursery rhyme lies spewing from screens, the burnt coffee and toast and rice and meat like lead in our bellies. Children humming songs about bluebirds they only know from books. It's okay to bite every curse your grandmother taught you in half, so that one part sticks to the roof of your mouth like a spell, and the other flies off into God's ears, so she knows this team spirit will not last. Mommy, do we have to die? Simone asks. I want to scream, no, stop that. You're 4 years old and death should be the last thing on your mind. I want to say, no, we will live forever and ever and only dogs die. Instead, I tell her, yes, but it's okay. And she runs off, singing about the sun, the moon, the dark spaces in between. No mata engorda, which translates into what doesn't kill you makes you bigger. Raised on olive trees and their switches, 7 siblings, Salazar, East Newark in the 70s, you wouldn't listen to doctors say, wash your hands several times a day, expectorate into your elbow. You'd scoff, blow your nose with yesterday's tissue, tell him only animals sneeze on themselves. Today, an older man at the supermarket said, step back 6 feet, please, while he grabbed too much bread for 2. A tired woman with a face mask sliced the chorizo like a sad violinist. What do you see from your sealed hospital window besides an ocean you don't bathe in, a sun that hasn't cloaked your bones for weeks? Here, I conjure you up, what I've left of your wisdom to get me through while my partner watches videos on food preservation. This is how we survive, she says. We can store cheese in salt for months. Ai ai, you would mutter, o fim do mundo. Ouve lá, you would ask, já comeste? Ode to the deer on the side of the road as America. Your ears still twitched 2 minutes after the crash, after someone who thought himself superior sped maniacally down a one-way in the dark. How could he have known you'd be there? He who sees himself center of the universe, how could he know you belong to this earth too? That this place is yours as much as his or mine, and really, weren't you here first? Isn't this documented biblically, scientifically, historically? By the time we got to you, it was too late. Despite the small pulse from your body, I knew death had come with its heavy boots and bag. Blood poured from your mouth, a tiny creek trickling back to its source, underground where nothing forgotten is forbidden. Haplessly, we called the police as if it would be of any use. The officer shrugged, said he'd call for your removal, insisted you never had a chance given where you wandered, as if the fur and field behind you weren't home, as if your freedom wasn't as precious as his. Thank you.
Thank you, Marina. And thank you, Felicia. Did it so quickly. You're amazing. That was beautiful. I love the pandemic poems in this last one also. That was awesome. And I think now is Emily. Emily, thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much, Marina. That was beautiful. And thanks so much, Word Up and Ananda, for bringing us all together. Really excited to be here. Excited to celebrate not only Motherland, but also Ananda, who is somebody I think of as not only like a really fierce advocate for poetry, but also for writers. She's at every single event somehow, even though she doesn't even live in my city anymore. And just, will stay with you at the bar forever, just like talking about language. So thanks so much, Ananda, for your friendship. And I'm so excited to see all the amazing places that your book is going to go. I'm just going to read 3 poems, all poems that are kind of interested in the intersections of language that I was kind of thinking of in just thinking about Ananda's work. Long men. Romance is slow water, water the under ask. Ask me, do I have belief? Belief a feathery root, rooting around a vastness. Vastly said, another night held to a foldable line, lining the silver bank, bank not light, light not fast, fasting my feeling a drawn form, formless, the tide overfull, overspooled by a lover, a non-belief. Reversible poem in dishwater. He carried me into the kitchen to get a glass of water. He reached for a cup in the sink, filled with dishwater. Wait, I said, and opened the cabinet for a glass. Still, he went for the cup in the sink. Why do you want to drink from a dirty glass? I asked. It doesn't need to be clean, he said, but accepted the clean one I held out to him. I held out a glass to him. He accepted, he said, clean is a need, isn't it? I asked to drink from a dirty glass. I want you. The sink, the cup still, a glass cabinet open. I waited, filled with dishwater. The cup sinking, he reached for me. The kitchen carried me into the glass. And this last poem is an obad, and it has a character at the very end of the poem, which translates to return. Obad and milk white. My father used to be a manager at a beverage factory. At the end of the day, when everyone else had left, he'd fill one of the vats with leftover milk and steam it until it was hot. Then he'd leave his clothes on the factory floor and take a long milk bath. Every so often, I remember this story and I won't know if I've dreamt it. My father and the milk fog and silver machinery. Those were the days my father ran up debts of beer and cigarettes at the local store. And before my long-haired mother began working at the factory, I imagined his body disappearing into white, his full head of black hair the first exclamation of a calligrapher's brush on rice paper. Did he long for a woman who could become my mother? Did small sounds in the silence frighten him? I want to inherit loneliness from the scene, but what do I know of my father's dreams? I'm still creating my own mythology of moving water, the field mice tunneling through ice in deep winter. When I draw a bath, I'm usually trying to take myself from sadness and into sleep. And in the blackest hour of morning, my head calls back my body, like the bird that circles high above, singing Hue, Hue, Hue. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emily. Those are so beautiful. Oh my gosh. Thank you. And now we have amazing Xandria.
Hi, am I up? I can't tell if I'm like highlighted. Okay. It feels so good to be here with all of you. Especially, I feel like there's some deep bonds here. I feel really new to the party and really lucky to be here after just meeting Ananda recently. And it's been great seeing the reception so far. So thank you for letting me be a part of it. I'm just going to read two poems. I guess, and cornerly enough from the time that we met, that I was editing during when we met because it was at the conference. But I don't want to take up too much time. This first poem is called Film Theory. A character I love dies and I am ruined. Things that haven't happened hurt me considerably. Hurt me considerably, and I'll act like nothing happened. Nothing happened, but I expired on the cellular level. Cell death corresponds to an intangible loss. Intangible loss is fiction's cornerstone. I corner fiction for a confession. I'm not real, none of this is. Fiction cannot unplant an image, it can only corrupt it. Film corrupts an image at 24 frames per second. When an image corrupts a body, we call this character. A character wears a body, not the other way around. A body wears shame, its own or a director's. Anything that contradicts a director, they cut. A cut is a place where I have been severed from myself. A character is a version severed from itself. A version deceased withers on its person. Thank you. This last poem is kind of subtly, but not so subtly, after Watchmen. And the title is I'm in every moment we were together all at once. Blue being, blue as you received me. Blue the black flips over to reveal. Blue the lead Death Star. Blue where I slip time's leash. Blue tolling singularity. Blue the cape of deep light. Blue doll imposter. Blue and mounting authority. Blue life pending. Blue the cartel of loneliness. Blue were the muzzle arias. Blue pickpocket of heat. Blue new body. Blue rancor of love. Blue how I will learn to. Blue the day we met. Blue slings a new day across their chest. Blue the radical limitless. Blue the legend of flight. Blue swoon of egrets. Blue undoes their belt. Blue the whelp of dislogic. Blue sexless stigma. Blue radioactive. Blue the headless door. Blue bitter devotion. Blue is glacier blood. Blue arrives, chronology departs. Blue hemisphere of memory. Blue scoundrel in an open field. Blue enters a room and everyone looks. Thank you.
That was so amazing. That's so great. Thank you, Xandria. And you know, I saw you read the first poem and maybe the second. Yeah, and I was just it's just amazing. And your work is so beautiful, and meeting you was really beautiful too. So I'm so glad you're here. And thank you, everybody. And now it's me, so that's why I'm talking a lot. um, so thank you so much, everybody. And I am so happy, as I mentioned to the readers before we started. I got to invite people for this event. Thank you so much, Word Up. And I just love everybody who's here, and their work, as you saw, is just so brilliant, and it's just great to be here. And thank you for your kind words. And I'm so happy also that Word Up is running this. Alyssa was here. Alyssa is here, and she's the one who sort of said, "Oh, you should ask them." And everybody else that I hear about this place, they just love it. So this is just beautiful. Yeah, let me start my timer. So I'm going to read a couple of poems, and there's some that are sort of very emblematic of what's in the collection. So I sort of will go with those. There you go. So I am going to start with one called Line. There you go. Line. I inherited from my mother the knobbly joints and square ends of my fingers. From my father, I got the habit of biting my nails. Their shortness, the frayed missing skin, had never bothered me. But now I have a son, and he has begun to bite too. In America, I learned that I can snap a rubber band against my wrist each time my hand reaches up towards the mouth. On the back of my hand, the rubber band disappears into the color of my skin. But when I turn and face the inner side, it is a clear division of my body. The first time I saw a cotton tree, I found it beautiful. The cotton, so white in its brown cradle, so soft against the square tips of my fingers, I squeezed the dead flower around it and felt joy from hearing it crackle. As children, we had cups full of sugarcane. We chewed on it and spit out the bagasse. Toothless men ran the knobbly stalks through a machine. The juice trickled into our glasses, and the flat piece that came out on the other side was put through it again until everything was gone. The dry split stalk thrown into a pile, limp like blonde hair. When I first arrived in America, I didn't understand what people meant when they said with an American accent that they were Irish or Italian or French. Now that I understand, I asked my mother for a family tree. She said she had never thought of such things, and she wouldn't know much past her grandmother's first name. So what I have is my memory of the faces of my relatives and my own. When I first arrived in America, all I could see was beauty. The snow, fine like sugar, white like cotton, but now the beauty, the land, the tired metaphors just make me sad. Before I left for America, I saw an individual in the mirror. But today I see my father, my mother, my brothers, my son, and a man missing skin from tears on his back, and the man who did it. When I looked this morning, I tugged on my rubber band so hard that it broke. All right. Good. Yeah, I'm going to read this one because I wrote it in a class with Emily. So that's good. And this one also has a lot of these themes in the collection. And it's called Meat. In the red light of late afternoon, I stand clean and naked in the post-shower fog with a bleary reflection of this body of mine, of yours, and I want to call the conference of my face, summon us from this body of mine, of yours, but I don't know how to sift through the indices of pronouns in our languages. I want you to confess twisting the proteins of your mouths, masked in the muscles in my cheeks, as I wipe wet, my hands wrinkled with condensation, and stares at this face of yours, of mine, asking, what have you done to us? What have we done to you? Can I claim you as you did one another? My voice echoes and I get closer to the cleared path, fogging again. Cold silver surface still open. My mouth and exhale as we hide in this meat of me, this soft present skin. So yeah, so another one from that time. So this is the first poem in the collection. And Felicia, that beautiful, beautiful poem is longer. And also it has a reference to Up, which is not the same movie, but this has a reference to Ice Age, as people probably heard. That movie really freaks me out. It's freaked me out for a long time. So it references that, like my son watching it, so I'm doubly freaked out. And also it references the seed bank where they have all the seeds of all the plants in the world that are discovered, but that was breached because of melting ice. They fixed it for now, but we'll see. But it was around the time when there was a breach. In-flight entertainment while the doomsday seed bank is breached. And that's my last poem. My son's face is blue with a soft light of ice, age falling on his round cheeks, the voices in the animation contained by the cups of his child-sized earphones, muffled by the shush of turbans, so constant, so similar to the soothing sound of waves, we forget the aggression of their volume. On his screen, the body of a desperate little mammal is repeatedly crushed by gravity, rocks and metal, the creature still unable to reach the nut as its head smashed between two stainless steel plates, its eyes bulging out of their sockets, and my son laughs. He understands what is expected of him now. In this type of movie, there are always good guys who always win. When we walked in the dim amber light in the Natural History Museum, surrounded by bones, we were told we were the sole survivors, the lonely branch of the human family tree, because of our superb adaptability. And we chose to differentiate ourselves from the dead with a postfix, sapiens. The picture of the global seed vault in the Arctic made me think of architecture and the architect who said, "A vida um sopro," life is a breath. At that speed, the floor of the poet's green room is damp, now wet, now water covers the wrought iron feet of the bed where she sleeps with her lover. And water fills the Natural History Museum, and we float above the tallest of bone structures. Our heads tilt against the ceiling as we drink from the mouth of a whale, the last sliver of air. And I hum and hold my son's hand and think of the cow carcasses in the drought-cracked soil of the Northeast. The walls in China, Germany, Palestine, the barbed wire wall around my mother's condominium, and the futile future walls sprout one after another in an accelerating stop motion video, then blur, then crumble. And soon there'll be no need for green camouflage uniforms. Gone will be the beautiful armament celebrated in the old news. Gone is music. Gone is the green of money and the green of poetry. Gone were the paintings and recordings in museums. Mathematics gone. Long gone have been architecture and those seeds in the abandoned coal mine in the Arctic. On the colorless surface of the moon, imprinted in its sterile dust, undisturbed by wind or water, there will always remain a footprint. But for now, I turn my screen to a map of our journey, our airplane, tiny, surrounded by blue. Thank you so much. Thank you all. So I think we can do a Q&A now. So if anybody has any questions about anything for any of the poets. And I don't know how to operate this thing. I think only Carolina can see the hands and the stuff like that, maybe, I don't know.
So there aren't any questions in the Q&A. I don't know if you guys want to discuss maybe amongst yourselves.
Perfect. All right. So
Ananda, do you want to talk a little bit about like the impetus for this book and the creation process for it? I would just love to hear sort of where this came from, you know, from the inside out.
Thank you so much, Felicia. Thank you. And thank you for being the panelist that most know what's going on. Thank you. You have so much. Yeah, so you know, I hear that about first collections, that it takes a long time, and in the beginning you're just collecting everything you have basically, and you're sort of experimenting with all the poems and seeing how they can fit in a book. But I think because a lot of the early poems were written when my son was very little, and you know, they take a lot of your mental room and your emotional room, so it was just such a big part of my world. And being, and you know, then there's America, which has always been and always is the way it is. But for me personally, there was this two shifts that sort of coincided at that time. One is I had already immigrated to America, but I was very, it didn't feel as permanent. I had lived in Australia before. You know, I lived in Brazil. I was here. I was like settled here, but in my mind, I was like, well, maybe I'll stay, maybe not. Who knows? You know. So when my son was born here, there was this shift, and my experience of immigration changed. It became much more permanent, and I began to feel as I was a part of what was going on here more. And the history of this place became mine via him. You know, so those two shifts sort of intersected, and this book is very much about that. I first started writing the book, and I felt, okay, I'm writing a book, but then it was kind of very broad. And then I ended up carving a chapbook out of the book, and that really helped me create like a seed, you know, a center. And so having the chapbook out really helped me sort of put boundaries and make it cohesive from there. So that was kind of the process. Thank you. Very nice. I would love to hear from everybody. I know I'll start with Marina because you mentioned that you're working on this manuscript, which the subject, I love it. So there's a lot of intersection. So I would love to start with you to see what everybody's working on, if anything specific. If not, that's also fine. So Marina, if you could tell me a little bit more about this project. I know you have a book coming out soon, so if you could mention that, and then the next thing as well.
It wouldn't be you if you weren't sharing the spotlight, Ananda. Thank you. And I do have a question for you after we do, because I want to talk a little bit about motherland and fear. So I do have Tantu Tantu coming out next year in 2022, and the collection I read from is still sort of a work in progress, and it deals with loss, right, and sort of what is loss, right? And what does it look like? What does it feel like? And is there such a thing as losing something that you never really had to begin with, right? And sort of the things that cross the idea of loss is, death, right? Motherhood, right? The sort of the things that we lose when we become mothers. Sort of this pandemic, the way the pandemic sort of handed us a grief that I think was very foreign to a lot of us. The loss of privacy, the loss of space, the loss of access. I mean, I really try to look at loss in all of its manifestations. So that's what this project looks at.
Great. And Emily, your chapbook, right? That is it's coming out soon, right?
Yeah, I have a chapbook coming out.
It's the PSA chapbook.
Yes, the PSA chapbook coming out either I think in like the next few weeks, probably. I'm not totally set on a date, but that is the next thing for me. Thanks for asking.
All right, and I know Xandria and Felicia had books come out very recently, right? So if you can just mention a little bit about that, and or talk about other things that you're working on.
So I read from I guess my second poetry project, which, as much as I'm not mentioning the pandemic in it, feels very much like a pandemic project, in that I'm kind of working through some of my relationship to media. But yeah, I'm trying to find a balance of being derivative and not being derivative. I think I think we all love things that are self-referential, but like there's a limit. So I guess I'm working through how to expand some of the things that I'm interested in into their own universes. But thank you for that question.
Ananda, that was actually the same question that I was going to ask, because I'm always so curious as to what everyone is sort of putting their energy and attention toward when it comes to their art. I have a real infidelity for my own art that and I honor all that work that goes in, Ananda, to like scheduling and the hustle that goes around being an artist and having your art and book out into the world. I mean, it takes so much from us. I always fail at it. I fail pretty miserably. I had a book come out in 2020 and then a book come out in 2021. I have one coming out in 2022. But this new project, I'm almost done with this manuscript, which feels really exciting. And then of course, as soon as I start a new project, then this one will be just fine. But a lot of the thinking that I'm doing, I'm really intrigued and also proud of like trans, queer, and BIPOC artists who are able to immediately jump into the wounds of who they are with identity, because it took me about like 4 manuscripts before I could even write a poem about my father, and then 7 manuscripts before I could write a poem about living in a motel and growing up in poverty, and some of the things that happened in my lineage. And I, you know, we all sort of are at our own journeys when it comes to our art and our writing. And I always feel like I always do things opposite. so you know, it took me 40 some years to be able to write a poem that actually has my name in it. And now there's apparently a lot. So the pieces that I read, the sections that I read today are from that newest manuscript, and it's something. And who knows what it will fully be when it's done.
That's beautiful. I'm very excited. And it's, you know, as a reader, all that work to get to that is just amazing. So that's great. And I think Marina said she had. Marina, did you have a question?
Yeah, and it goes for you, and of course our other poets are open to it too. I was wondering, in Motherland, and I guess in any of your projects, was there any places that you, it's so funny, I have a question but I don't know if it's a question. Is there any places you were scared to go to in your writing? Was there any place that you wrote from fear from? How do you tackle fear and writing from it or writing about it?
Yeah, I think that I love that question. And I think there's multiple ways that I don't know, it manifests. So I think the experience of having a young child, but I think any child is just, I think older child going to the world, younger child, there is a lot of fear of things that you start seeing all the danger everywhere that it becomes much more present in your mind. And I think talking myself through what these things mean is certainly something I like doing in my work. Just sort of having a way to speak about it. And I think especially in poetry, you know, I can't really, I write fiction. I cannot write nonfiction. I think it's the hardest thing in the world. But I think poetry is exactly the vehicle for me, because there's so much nonverbal that you use in poetry that can communicate or sort of capture that stuff without me having to explain all of it, you know? So I think that kind of fear. The other thing is everything about living in America always, and then the particularities of this time when this book was written and today. There's a lot of juggling of my fear and things that target me, yet so many people who are targeted even more. So there's this thinking about my fear and feeling bad about my fear. Like, for example, I have documents, right? I'm a citizen, feeling very scared, but also feeling very bad that I'm scared in this position. So I think having the space to have these things live and not being in a sort of structured essay argument is very important. It was very important in the writing of this book and in my work in general. So I think there's a lot of fear here and a lot of thinking about fear and how it interacts with all these other parts of being a person here today, you know? So I love that question. Thank you. And if anybody else wants to answer too. if okay, good. If anybody wants to talk about fear, you can talk about fear, then I'll answer her question.
Oh, I'll mention one thing about fear, because I think I'm always scared about what'll come out in my writing. And it's because so much memory is a really fluid truth, right? And an inconsistent truth, where when you go through certain things, you bury memory in order to survive. And the newest manuscript is bringing up memories that are 30 years old that I realized that I didn't tell anybody. And there's a question around the secret, like what becomes a secret and why does it become a secret? And we have a potential to rewound ourselves in our creations. And so we have to be really mindful of the spaces that we step into, because I'm scared of what I'll write, but like Denzel Lewis says, like I'm more scared to not write. so I'd rather take that risk, but only us as artists, like each one of us as an artist has to decide, is that rewounding something that we can handle in that moment? Because I don't see writing as therapy. Like that's, I have therapists for that, for that. Like writing is something else. It's a channeling, it's a risking, it's a vulnerability, it's a larger conversation, it's the creating of worlds, it's the saying what must be said. But it's not just about me when I step into that world. And so I think there's always a fear of what that world will present, because sometimes I feel like I'm not always in control of it.
I thought of something. Thank you for that, Felicia. I'm thinking about Kevin Young's book, The Great Album, and the Shadow books. And I'm thinking about, I think my fear is just the books that don't get written is where my fear comes from, and all the lines that you miss when you're at the gym and you're not fast enough to get to your notes app or your grocery shopping, like that kind of void of creative energy. I think that's my fear around creating. I usually feel pretty glad when I can process something beautifully. It feels kind of like a cherry on top, but for me, it's really about stagnation.
Those are great. Very nice. So I had a question here from Carolina about the cover, which so lovely. Yeah, the cover, I feel very lucky. So Black Lawrence is a small press, so they don't have all the money in the world, but they had a place of just artists that sell their visual art. And they said, look, you can look through this, and we had some luck like paying them just to license, so I looked for a long time, and when I saw this painting, I was like, oh, this is perfect. The blue, the colors, but also just all that blue, and just, it's just very lovely, and it worked really nicely. So we just wrote nicely to the painter, and she said yes. And she wanted to read the book first, which is lovely, and she read it, and she said yes, and I'm very grateful. And then their designer was very lovely that she sent me. I think I sent Emily some. Did I send you some? Yeah. She sent me like, I don't know, 10 amazing covers that I loved, all very similar to this one, but variations. And I went, it was very hard, but I really like this one because it sort of mixes the font and everything. So that's the story of the cover. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone. This was lovely. So I'm just going to say thank you so much to everyone that came. Thank you all. Like, your work is so beautiful, and this makes me so happy. Yeah, it's very special to me to have you all share your beautiful work and to be able to listen to it. And thank you so much, Word Up. And I'll pass the baton to Carolina.
Yeah, thank you everyone for sharing your beautiful poetry. It's been such a pleasure just sitting here, relaxing and really listening to everyone. And yeah, thank you everyone for attending. Check us out at wordupbooks.com. You can get all these poetry books there. And yeah, check us out. We have more upcoming events that are outside and virtual. And again, thank you. So everyone have a good night.